Crazy.
So I'm going to show you the workflow PDF, big on this guy, but I'm actually going to run it off my computer because I've got working files in here that I can use, and I want to move everything over here really quick. And hopefully my drivers are good. Right now, the entire media group is cringing at the fact that I just unplugged that printer and plugged it into my RNU. You guys are all like, oh, God, no. All right. So in the workflow guides right here, there's actually another subfolders in here. So you should just know what I ultimately gave you guys, just to go through it really fast. There is the Digital Lab counter guides. If you actually look at this is everything that I could find that dealt with anybody who's actually working at the counter up there. It's checking gear in, checking gear out, doing all of that kind of stuff. There's also, and you guys should know this has been updated, this monitor calibration in 10 steps. Monitor calibration has gotten really complex now. And the complexity that's coming, you guys should grab a chair and relax. The complexity of all of this has come from the updates in software. So for instance, for any of those who care about, again, and this, how often are you guys calibrating before?
I would get it like every month.
Every month?
Yeah, like
we should try to get that down to probably once a week if we could do that.
We did one, I don't know, when I didn't have a shift here this semester, but we did once a week.
Once a week, that would be great if we could get to that. Again, Robert, I have no idea who we talked about that. I know, I was almost there with you, right?
Whoa!
Okay, right? But at any rate, one of the problems, I'm just going to show you a couple of the problems really quickly. If we come up to system preferences and we actually go to displays, in displays you have now got all this shit like automatically adjust brightness. That right there violates the profile. The profile is no longer valid because what's happening is that the camera here is measuring the brightness of the room and it's changing the brightness of this monitor automatically, which invalidates the profile. The profile is meant for a fixed brightness. It doesn't end there. If you click on night shift, it will actually change the color for you of your monitor to make it more pleasing to your eye. So how do you do serious color work when your monitor is actually getting cooler and warmer? And it goes on and on and on. There is an entire litany of things that you have got to turn off. So I'm just throwing that out there. It's all written into this PDF. So if you guys just follow the steps right here, you'll be good to go. In this, do we have any, who would know in this, do we have any idea if the profiles that are, the calibration profiles that are built for these, did they have to be loaded every single day?
Yeah, they'll be loaded
So it's
every day.
another thing that these computers now reset at night. So even though you have gone to system, so when their profile, they come up to system preferences, and in again display and system preferences, we can go to color. This is now defaulted back to the color profile that Macintosh shipped, that Apple shipped with this guy. You can see the custom profile for this guy is sitting probably down. It doesn't look like this has had a custom profile done since they've updated the software, because it will have a number. It'll have this number with it and a date on it. So these have not been profiled yet. So Sai, if you're working on this computer, you're screwed.
I was working at 8.
Yeah, the color on all these is off because they haven't been profiled. They haven't been calibrated or profiled, either one.
So, okay,
So you're
but
guessing.
back to that, is that something that Photo 2 instructors would be doing, or is
No,
that something
that is something that the digital
people
lab does.
will be doing?
But the trick to this
Okay.
is that because these computers reset every time, every single day you come in here, you've got to reload the calibration profile that they made. Or they have to do it. I don't know how we want to do that part, but if they're going to go to the trouble of calibrating these things and then the profile is not loaded, it's pointless.
We can't do it because it's user dependent.
Okay, so the users have to do it.
Yeah, because
So this becomes a part of that workflow, and it's sitting right here. This just tells you how to do it. So if you again double click on this, I've built all of this for you. It's just something that we should probably print this out along with that other printer form, and it should just hang on the side of this guy that tells everybody. It's very simple to do. You simply go into System Preferences and pick it, and you're good to go. But if you don't pick it, you are in an unmonitored, uncalibrated state. And Apple, their white point is like 9,600 degrees Kelvin. It's like blue enough to be on the top of Mount Everest on a cloudless day.
So this is something that we would do just like
first thing.
checking the printer nozzles.
Exactly.
It's just like part of your routine.
Yes, exactly right. Okay. But what we want to deal with now, again, so this is, everything that's up here is the digital counter stuff. So, and if you guys look through this and find that there's problems with any of this, please let me know and we can amend all of this. There's equipment service guides. This would only apply, this is like how to find the part number for the replacement knob. This isn't for students, it's not for instructors, it's not for anybody. So it's just, again, that's what this is. There's service guides. You guys primarily care about these workflow and guides. So again, inside of printing in here, you will have, it's basically the updated version of that laminated piece of plastic. It's the Canon and Epson inkjet printing. It's this one right here. You also have in here the instructions for Canon nozzle check. You also have the user manual. Then you got the same thing for Epson. You have the nozzle check, you have the user guide, and then again, the printing part of it, Epson and the inkjet printing, Canon and Epson inkjet have been combined into one single PDF. So if you double click on this guy, it will walk you through, and it basically describes nozzle check right here. Again, even though there's a separate nozzle check, this is exactly the thing that existed before, so you guys nothing here has changed. That part's all the same, and we're going to start here with Epson. So this is for the Epson P800s. So then we're going to click and go down. This is what mistakes look like on the Epson P100, and it talks about what to do. Clearly this is fine up here at the top. This needs cleaning down here at the bottom. It walks you through how to do all of that part, and then we get to the printing part of Photoshop. So again, I'm going to do this off of my computer, but this is starting with the Epson, so I need to get to that computer. Is that an Epson right behind me? Is that Canon?
This is Epson.
Perfect. I'm going to steal that cord. Do we think this guy will reach? No, we don't. Alright, so let's start on this end over here, because this is basically where the setup part starts here. So for me, I've got a file that's open up in Photoshop right here. Hopefully I am connected to that Epson printer, and it's going to actually walk you through this part of it right here. So we're simply going to step through this one at a time. So the first thing that you need to actually do, can you guys see? I feel like, okay. First thing you need to do, I'm inside of Photoshop right here. Again, I would have done all the sharpening that I need to print my file. The file will be ready to go so that we can actually print it. This is going to be one of the things that I have a problem, and maybe one of the things that you would consider changing is that a problem that I have when you're sharpening in Lightroom, you get 3 choices, and it's blunt. In Photoshop, you can sharpen, you have a whole lot more control about it. You can use masks to control where you sharpen, where you don't. So I'm not expecting Photo Practice 1 or Photo Practice 2 because they are all primarily staying in Lightroom to do that. But once you migrate to Photo Practice 3 and you're getting into that, it really makes sense to be doing all of your printing out of Photoshop because you have more control. Now, that doesn't mean if you want to print, a thumbnail of 1,000 files, you don't stay in Lightroom and do that part, but Again, there's more control that's built into this, and I'll show you exactly what that part means. So at any rate, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to simply click on the File menu and come down to Print. And then there's some things that we need to set up in this right away, and the order that you do this in matters. And so you can see here at the very top, it says to select your printer from the very top, which is exactly the same thing it's always been. So up here at the very top in my printer setup, I'm going to click on my drop-down menu and I'm going to come down to this, to my Epson SC P800. And then again, what happens now, and this is the thing that screws a lot of people up, and I think it's unfortunate because it's a change that should happen in their interface. Your next logical move would be to simply come down to the next level and click on printer settings. But that's wrong, because printer settings here are controlled by how you set up color handling down here. So you can see by default, this is set up for printer manages color. That will have an impact on your printer settings. So if we go after printer settings now, it would be wrong because we don't want the printer to manage our color. You click on this drop-down menu and come and say, Photoshop manages the color. And it'll say all of this right in here about that. Your next move down is you need to pick your printer profile. So if you click on this drop-down menu, now I've got an extensive number of these because I've got a huge number of printers that are actually associated with this, but nonetheless, this will actually get me through all of those parts right here. Your printer profile is printer and paper dependent. It's both of them. You have to have them together. So these are CAN profiles that are sitting right here that are actually set up for an Epson printer. People can make their own profiles. There's the gear here to do that. So if you've got somebody who wants to print Red River matte on an Epson printer, Red River may have a profile for that. If they don't, you can actually make your own custom profile. It'll be loaded in here, and that's the one you want to use. But you cannot mix these up. You cannot take a piece of Canon glossy paper and put it in this thing and set up Epson's glossy paper and run it and expect to get anything out of it that you could use. It simply won't happen. Does that sort of make sense? So again, printer and paper dependent on both. I'm going to actually just set this up to print to a premium photo glossy paper. Again, it's an Epson paper, so this part is set up. So now we've gone through the color management part. The next part down is rendering intent. If you click on the drop-down menu for rendering intent, the only two we use in photography are perceptual and relative colorimetric. The difference between those two, without getting too deep into this, is that if you have an image that's got a lot of saturated color, a lot of out-of-gamut color that you can, saturated colors that you can see on your screen but that will never print on a printer, in that case you want to use perceptual because it will bring in all of that information, but it will preserve the relationship of all the colors to each other. If you've got an image that has very, very little out-of-gamut color or no out-of-gamut color at all, you use relative colorimetric because that way none of your numbers will change. The numbers that you're seeing on the screen will be exactly what your printer's giving you because they're capable of, both of them are capable, the printer's capable of doing everything you're seeing on screen. Make sense? So only two options. In this case, most of what I work in doesn't need perceptual. Relative colorimetric works for me. Black point compensation, you always want to check that part because it matches the black point of your file to the black point of your printer. If you guys if you have people who are showing you stuff prints that tend to be really washed out and flat, and it's specifically the blacks, they tend to be really, there's no deep rich black in there, it's because they don't have this part checked. As we continue to go down here, again, I'm going down strictly to this part. Black point compensation is on. Position and size, you want to go ahead and leave this centered unless there's some very specific reason that you want to offset where your printer is. If that's the case, I personally feel like it's better to set that up as a page in Photoshop with your image offset than it is to try to use these controls, because if you use these controls, you've got to figure out the borders that it's not printing on. It's just a world of hurt that you don't need. It's just easier to set it up in Photoshop to do that part. Something that a lot of people don't do, but that I do quite a bit, and it shows in this image. So this is an image, it's a knockout of a person that's simply on a white screen. So if I print this out on an oversized piece of paper, I have no idea how to trim it out. I have no idea where my edges are really supposed to be. If you click on this corner mark, so this is under printing marks down here, I'm still scrolling down to the bottom. If you click on the drop down for printer marks and you simply click on corner marks, you'll see what it does is this. I can't zoom into this part. It actually adds little crosshair marks outside of the corners of your image so that you can drop a ruler on those guys and trim your prints out, and it works perfect. If you've got a horizontal one that's actually a 2-page spread, you can actually add the center crop mark to that as well, and it'll give you, again, cut marks for the center. It'll show you exactly where the gutter is. So you don't have to measure all this stuff out. You don't have to do all that hard. All of these printer marks happen outside of your image, so that part won't matter. The rest of this you don't need to worry about. The rest of that part's done. Then we do need to go up to printer settings and to select printer settings right now. So when we go up to printer settings, again, I'm going to drop down menu really quickly. When we come up to printer settings, the first and foremost rule is that you got to make sure that the printer that you selected is still selected, because this can shift. So we started setting it up for this Epson, but all of a sudden you open up this dialog box and there's a Canon driver in there, and people don't pay attention to that, and then you're just hopeless. Make sense? Okay, so the Epson printer is the one that's actually selected. It's what I want. And then again, at this stage of the game, you'll see coming down into our list that you have to set paper size here. Now, at least Canon's driver and Epson's driver have done both of this. Is now what happens is when you select paper size, so you can see in this case I've got a 12 by 12 that I'm actually picking because that's what size my portfolio is. You'll see that I've got a regular 12 by 12 inch here, but I've also got one that's set up for roll paper, and then I've got another one set up for front poster board. Those are all different ways that you feed media into that printer. This has an impact coming up later on when we get to the print dialog box. It used to be you could change this after the fact. You can't anymore. So what you set up here is what we are going to inherit down the line. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it. Actually, I'm going to change this to just a US letter so everybody can see that. But again, in your US letters, you'll see you have a regular US letter, you have borderless auto expand, borderless retain size, roll paper, and then again, the front loading part. All of those are going to impact what we inherit down the line. Make sense? All right, so I'm just going to do a regular, the regular US letter. And then again, as we come down here, it'll tell you that again, you've got to set your paper size exactly. Oh, if you need a custom paper size, you can actually do that. It's right down here at the bottom. You select Manage Custom Sizes, open it up, and this will allow you to build a brand new custom size piece of paper. So if it doesn't exist, you can build it here. In our case, though, I'm going to leave it as US letter. Then continuing down here, you need to, and this is one of the things a little bit wonky about how Courtney, I think this was Courtney who originally built these. What this is telling you is that you need to click on the layout button of this, the layout drop-down menu of this, and change it to printer settings. All of these dialog boxes, unfortunately, needed to be rebuilt, but that's neither here nor there. So down to printer settings, and this thing will open up, and this is exactly what I was talking about here. You can see that in my page setup right here, it is, I don't have an option to change this. This is where I would change it normally to a roll or to a front media feed, that kind of stuff. I've already picked that in the screen before, so this is not changeable anymore. So paper source right here is also going to be impacted by that. You'll see that if you've actually set up roll, the only thing that you get here is roll. You can't change that. But in our case, we can actually go from the sheet feeder to the fine art front meter here. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave it on the sheet feeder. In media type, in this drop-down menu, you need to pick the stock that you use, not only to print, but the one that your profile that we selected in the very beginning is based on. So who remembers what I did? I was doing premium photo glossy, right? So that's what we have to select here. So in the drop-down menu, I'm going to do premium photo glossy paper. Those two have to match. Then this part coming down here, you actually have an output resolution, and you'll see in this case it says super fine because my pictures are super fine. But if you click on that drop-down menu, you'll see you have super photo instead of super fine. Don't you wish you got paid $150,000 a year to come up with names for either nail polish or settings in an Epson print driver? I do. Where would I live? I wouldn't, oh, I think I would live here. I actually love this city. So the only difference in these two is, and this is a confusion thing for a lot of people, this has got nothing to do with the resolution of your file. This has to do with how fine the little drops of ink that you put down in that printer are. It doesn't change the resolution of your file at all. It's just how little those drops are. The smaller the drop, the more nuanced color you can get. So the total number of colors that are available to you in a 2,880 dpi dot per inch print is greater than the 1440. I have never seen anybody who could spot the difference. And the 2,880 version takes almost twice as long to actually print out. So I use the superfine one. In terms of high speed, I do leave high speed on, and I do check finest detail. I don't know why they would actually even have finest detail as an option. No, just beat the shit out of my print. I don't care. I just make it look really blocky. I make it look like a graphic arts poster. That's what I really want. It doesn't seem to have any. The one thing I will say about high speed, what high speed does, and it used to be something that people would say turn off, because what happens is that as your print head goes across, it lays down ink, and then it comes back in the other direction, it lays down ink. And they used to have registration issues with that. But printers have gotten so good now, there's no longer registration issues. So it used to be in the old days is it would print across. If you turn that off, the head has to travel back to the beginning, and then it does the next pass across. So it's only doing ink in one direction. Again, I think they've eliminated those problems. What you will see, though, is people who are doing super heavy matte papers, fine art papers, they're putting cardboard through those things, whatever. Sometimes those thicker stocks, as the head comes back, it can actually hit. And you'll see streaks on the side of your paper. You'll see the streaks on the edges of your paper. If that's happening, turn this fast off, because then it will only go in one direction. It'll only lay ink down in one direction. So when it's coming back, it won't clip the edge of that paper and lay down that mark. So that's what these guys are all about. So then, again, I'm simply going down through the media here. It says to keep those guys on. It actually explains the head strike issue that's sitting right here. And then at this stage of the game, you can actually save these settings. And then you're simply ready to print. Then again, down here, save your settings and click on that, and you're ready to print your file. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Are there questions about this? How many of you guys are doing advanced black and white? Anyone? So advanced black and white does exist, both in Epson and Canon. I'm going to show it to you really quickly. What happens in doing advanced black and white is these things change a little bit. I'm going to hit cancel out of here. Again, this is the entire process for doing advanced black and white printing. I'm going to see if I can remember this from scratch, because I haven't read through this, although I know that this part will actually work. Okay.
So this is the updated version?
This is the updated version.
Okay.
This has got all the updated stuff that you actually need to know in this. The printing from Photoshop didn't take a lot of work. The printing from Lightroom did. Okay, so the same trick. I'm going to go back up to the file menu. I'm going to come down. First thing I actually need to do is I actually need to convert this to a grayscale image. So I would go up to image, down to mode, and convert to grayscale, or do a black and white. However you guys do your conversion. I don't really think grayscale is the best way to do it. I'm much more about doing a black and white version of this. So what I would do is I would run up to the top. I would add a black and white layer to this. It converts it to black and white. I am then going to flatten this image. I don't think the advanced black and white likes layered files, and it doesn't like RGB files. So I'm going to flatten this guy. I'm not going to save it that way, but I am going to temporarily flatten this, and then I'm going to change its mode to grayscale, because the grayscale conversion has already happened now. So I'm simply putting it in a different color space. So changing it to grayscale, but nothing is actually going to change in this. So it's the adjustment layer did the conversion for me, which is a superior way to actually do this. Then up to the file menu, down to print. And now again, things are going to change here. So again, you want to select the printer up at the top, but at this stage of the game now, you actually need to change this so that the printer manages the color. The printer is now going to use its algorithms for black and white to use the ink set in this printer to give you this advanced black and white part. So again, you change this part first. I'm going to leave it as, again, relative color metric. I don't need to add any of the stuff that's down here. Up to printer settings. In printer settings, things change a little bit here now. You've got to change your US letter to be, you would set your page size here, but then in this drop-down menu, instead of going immediately to printer settings, you want to go to color matching. And in color matching, you need to change this from color sync, which is Apple's control, to Epson controls color. Then go to the next thing down. You can go through paper handling and cover. This is only doing if you're trying to change the layout of an image. If you've got like you're trying to say like print a book and you want it to print in a specific order, that's what all the paper handling is about. Most people don't need to ever deal with that part. But I'm coming now here to the printer settings in this, and in the, all right, now I'm going to actually have to go to this guy. So we did color matching, we set to Epson color, 12B says we go in the basic, we change the print mode down here to advanced black and white. And that's where we change this to. And when this part actually happens, then actually continue to go through that. You'll again leave it at all high speed and all that kind of stuff. That part is good right there. Then we actually need to go to our advanced settings. And you have a whole dial here that allows you to basically emulate toning prints. So you can leave it as a straight neutral right here. They have a can set of prints in here. You can actually change this to a cooler set of blues. You have a really small preview here. I'm not blues. You have a cooler set of grays. You can actually change it to a warm. That actually sets it, it makes it slightly more sepia. Then you can actually go to a sepia, which makes it even warmer still. There's a control down here at the bottom that allows you to actually set this to anything you want. So if you wanted to print with a green bias, you can set it up that way. Anyway, that controls all of this. There are controls in this that will actually allow you to lighten your print, darken your print, do all of that kind of stuff. My suggestion is if this is printing too dark, you don't fix it in the driver here, you go back and you fix it in the file and then print the same way here. You don't want to start introducing too many variables here, and this is not the place, in my opinion, to change brightness, contrast, any of that kind of stuff. The irony of this one is if you click on tone in the drop-down menu here, you'll have light, normal, dark, darker, and darkest. Unfortunately, dark is normal. Dark is the default, and dark is where you want to start. You don't use normal. Normal will make it too light. I know. Shoot them all. Anyway, at this stage of the game, I would also hit save, and then you simply hit print. So that gets us through that part. Before I close out of here completely, are there any questions about printing out of Photoshop? Pretty good on this part? Okay. I'm going to hit this again on the Canon printers. We're going to go through the same thing in Photoshop. Hopefully lunch will be here. Lightroom should go relatively quick, and then we're done with all of this, and we can, I don't know. Robert's going to take us all to the tap place or the casino. Yeah, right. Okay.
For a junket.
I'm going to cancel out of this. I'm actually going to go back to where I just opened this file up and change it back into a normal print. I'm going to unplug this guy. I'm going to plug in this guy. So this is now my Canon printer that is on. So again, continuing down in the line right here, this is actually going to take us to the Lightroom version of Epson printing. So I'm going to skip this right now and we'll come back to it because I'm just set up here. So I'm going to go again, this is the continuation of doing it. So this now is how you would actually do a nozzle check on a Canon printer like this. It is different than using the nozzle check on the Canon guy right here. The nozzle check on the Canon one, you actually manage that from software on your computer. The nozzle check on this guy, or the cleaning stuff, whatever, is managed through this this menu that sits up right up here. Actually, I think this is a better method of it myself, but again, mistakes that you're actually going to see. This is what the check for the nozzles in this guy looks like right here. So this then goes back to doing our Photoshop printing for this Canon printer right here. So to do it again, I've got my file here. I've done all the sharpening. It's ready to go. I'm going to come up to the File menu, and I'm going to come down to Print. It opens up the printer dialog box, and again, in this case, you need to change this now to the print driver first that you want to use. Now, I ran into this, and I don't know if you guys know about this, whatever, but I actually had, I've got 3 Epson drivers that are loaded, Canon drivers that are loaded on this, all for Pro 1000 printers. The first of these is the oldest of the drivers, and it dumbs everything on this thing down. You get a dialog box when you say print, and it comes up, and it comes up, and your only option is easy print, and you can pick good, better, or best, and glossy or matte, and that is it, and then you hit print. It has none of the control that this thing really offers. It makes this thing seem like so make sure you have the right driver installed on this. These guys, all of these should have the correct drivers on it. So again, I'm selecting, in my case, it is my version 2 of this is what gives me all the options. And then again, you skip over printer settings here, down to color handling, come down in color handling to Photoshop manages color, and again, selecting the printer profile, you click on the drop-down menu. These are the profiles, these are the canned profiles for all of Canon paper that are installed on this, so I'm going to do a photo paper plus glossy 2. Could they get a longer name? Glossy 2 version 3. And then put in the date, 2008, not Daniel. Again, the same thing, relative colorimetric or perceptual, depending on how saturated your print is. Black point compensation you want to keep on. If you want to add the, again, leave this as centered. If you want to add the printer marks on here, you can actually add the printer marks. And other than that, we should be good to go. Then again, we're going to come up following this whole thing. We've gone through this, rendering intense, black point compensation, all of that. Come back up to click on print settings. I'm going to click on my little drop-down guy right here. And the next printing settings, again, the first thing you would set is your printer, is the paper that you're going to do. Because again, this has an impact later down the line about what we can and cannot do. So you can see with this Canon printer, I do have a borderless version of this. I've got a letter margin version of this as well, but I don't have a roll version of this. Whereas if we get up into some certain other things up in here, I do have, I think, a roll version somewhere up in here. Either that or I got the wrong driver installed. But we'll see. I'm going to just go to regular US letter as far as that part goes. And again, we're coming down here. When you click layout in this drop-down menu, this is one of the changes that happened. In the old Canon drivers, you used to get printer settings here. You don't get printer settings anymore. You get quality and media. If you click on quality and media, again, you go through pretty much the standard step again. You want to make sure that the printer that you've selected is indeed still the same one, that your paper size is indeed still the same one. Again, we've selected quality and media. In this drop-down menu, you want to make sure that we picked this photo paper plus glossy 2, because that's what we picked as our profile. Make sense? And then again, you'll see here, this is another change that has happened, and this is one of the things that I hated about Canon printers. If you look at this Canon printer right here, and you look at this guy right here, there's a feed tray that goes in right here. If you look behind it, there's actually a drop-down feed thing back here that allows you to feed much heavier media. Which of these two would you call the rear feed?
The rear feed.
The one in the back, right? The rear one. Well, they used to call this one the manual feed and this one the rear feed. They got so much shit about this, I'm certain, that they've renamed this now. They call this the top feed now, which makes more sense to me. But that means that their manuals are all wrong. So the manual that we've got, if you go in and look at this, it's going to call this thing the rear feed, and students are going to think it's that thing in the back. But nonetheless, I just am the messenger. So you're
saying this one is called the rear feed and the stuff?
No, rear feed is gone.
Okay.
So now you have manual feed stays.
Okay.
And this became top feed. So if you take a look in our drop-down menu here, you've got manual feed. That is the back one. And top feed is this one. So at any rate, you would pick top feed on this because I'm going to actually feed through this. And then in print quality here, and this is one of the things that I hate in this guy right here, and you can see, and I don't know why this is giving me standard here. These settings right here, the standard, high, and highest, are those exact same DPI settings. It's whether you're doing this, how fine a dot you're actually putting on this. Now I have no idea why it's the settings that I've got in here. This glossy paper is not allowing me to actually get to that higher DPI. It's only giving me a standard or a highest. Normally you would actually simply pick high, and that's what's listed right here, because that is close. It's not identical to Epson's 1440, but it's very close to it. This is forcing me to either dumb that down to a 720 or go all the way up to a 2880. Again, I'm not sure that those numbers are an exact equivalent, but they're very close. But that's what this setting is all about right here. So because I'm printing something I care about and it doesn't allow me to pick high, I'm going to go ahead and pick highest instead of standard. And then again, I would simply click again as we're going down here. This is the next thing that's a little bit weird of this. So this is highlighted now, and this has always existed here. You'll see it's in sort of, I'm trying to call out attention to this. There's another thing that you need to pick in this. So you need to change quality and media to paper detail settings. It's this one right here. And in paper detail settings, you actually have this cancel margin regulation down here at the bottom. This only applies to matte media. If you're using any matte media, you want to go ahead and enable this. If you're using non-matte media, you want to uncheck that part. And what this has to do, and you'll see, if you're printing matte media and you're having trouble again with those edge strikes, you're having where the paper is the head is going across, it's clipping the edges, and you get these, you just get these streaks of, like, usually it's black, these lines around the edge. It's not in the print itself, it's on the edges. It all has to do with this setting right here. So if you have this set for a matte paper and it's printing fine, great. If it isn't printing fine and you're getting those marks, you might want to go in and uncheck this. But again, it's all written right here. And then finally, you would simply click on save for this guy as well, and then print, and you're off to the races, and everything works out well. Are we good on this part?
There's sometimes for when I was printing matte papers, it wouldn't print at all if I didn't check that.
If you didn't check that part?
If I didn't check it.
Excellent to know. So if somebody's not, it's simply not printing. They really strongly recommend you have this for all of their matte papers, and then you don't have it for all of their other papers. But what a pain in the ass to hide it like that. If it's that important, bring it up front and center and actually have your paper selection automatically change it to one, because I had this set to a glossy paper and it's still enabled. So, yeah. Okay, so then you would simply hit print on that guy and we're good to go. I'm going to cancel out of this guy again. We're going to do one last one. I'm going to show you the black and white version of this. Again, it's the same thing as advanced black and white printing is for Epson, or proposes to be. So again, I'm going to do the change in this using black and white. That's actually now done my conversion for me. I am going to flatten this guy again. And then I'm going to go back up and convert this to a grayscale. Again, this will have all the integrity of whatever seriousness I took in converting this to a black and white, so that should be intact. Up to the file menu, down to print again. So in the print part right now, and this part I'm actually going to have to go through and actually read how these guys do it. I feel like it's probably relatively the same. So again, up here at the top, I do have this. I do have the correct printer is actually selected, and I don't have this print dialog box up yet. Okay. Copy paper size. That part is going to exist. Okay, it's the same trick as in the Canon part. You've got to change the color handling to the printer actually manages the color. So that part's going to be good. Normal printing, relative color metric, all of that part is great. Then I'm going to go to my printer settings. Again, you've got to set all of this color stuff first before you go into printer settings. In the color stuff, I've still got my drop-down menu that will allow me to change paper size right here. However, in my drop-down here, again, I'm going from layout to color matching. And in this case, I'm going to change it from color sync, again, Apple's version of color matching, to Canon's color matching. And then I'm going to click down again to continue down. My next one down is going to be quality and media. So I'll pick quality and media, and again I would select the paper stock that I'm actually printing to. I'm still going to print to that glossy paper. The top feed is this guy right here. I'm going to do all of that. The print quality here, again, I'm going to leave it on highest. That again is being clearly set by this paper stock itself. Then I'm going to click on this black and white print, I'm fairly certain, and I'm going to say okay to that. And then their next move over here is to actually go to, it looks like you've got a drop-down menu to do color options, and it'll be this guy right here, and it's the same trick that, again, Epson is trying to do. It's how you would either have a normal print using the algorithms in this guy to do your black and white work, or if you wanted to actually change the toning of this. So if we click on the drop-down tone, again, you have warm tone, you have cool tone, you have a custom tone, which allows you to do settings down here. I wouldn't change any of these contrast or brightness sliders right here. I wouldn't do that part, but you can take the image and you can actually shift it around. And it's too bad that they've got a preview of pencils instead of a person, but nonetheless they do. And then again, I would hit save, and then you hit print, and you're good to go. Questions about this? Okay, why don't we call this, any idea when pizza's on the way?
12:30 they should be here.
12:30 they should be there. Okay, so let me ask you guys, how are you at? Should we take a quick break, or do you want to soldier through Lightroom and call it a day?
Soldier through.
Soldier through, man after my own heart. Okay, are you guys good with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm gonna hit cancel out of here, close that up. I'm not gonna save that guy. We're gonna go to Lightroom now. I'm gonna go back to Epson first. And I'm gonna launch Lightroom. So I only have a single file in here that actually can be found because the rest of these files are either sitting on a hard drive somewhere or I've thrown them away because this is all a test suite for me. So I've really only got one file in here where the raw file actually exists. So again, if we were to look at my library right here, you can actually see that I've got warning signals on all of this. Got these little exclamation points saying the file doesn't exist, or we know the preview exists, but we can't find the file. And in order to print, you actually need the file. So the only one I really have is this one of a guy in a classroom, but you guys can imagine the great artwork that it is. Okay, so this is what it looks like in the library. If you click on the print option to actually bring this guy up, your first move is to actually select what it is you want to print, sitting right down in the thumbnails that run across the bottom. So I'm going to scroll back in here into our PDF so that we go back to the Epson printing. So this is Epson, yeah, so this is printing from Lightroom. So this is how, and again, this is all in this same PDF. So there's a couple of settings that we've got to do. So again, your first step right here is using the film strip at the bottom of the screen. Select the print that you want to do, which is what I've just done. It's selected right down here. So I've made that guy active. In terms of doing printing here, now what I'm not going to get into doing here is showing you guys print packages. I don't really see that as something applicable to us. We're not doing, yeah, I can give you 5 8x10s, 2 4x5s, 3, and 15 little baby glossies that Granite will love, whatever. Anyway, that's what all the packaging would be and about custom packaging. There's pre-built packages and custom, but for our case right here, we're going to, at the very top right up here, select single image and contact sheet. Then if we go down to our next step down here, again, you would leave rotate to fit checked because it'll automatically understand if you're printing horizontal or vertical. One of the things that you should know about this, actually everybody should stand up and see this really quick. I'm not actually going to bother to print, Robert, because I don't know we need to go through it. But to actually load a print, a piece of paper in this guy.
In the can, you're talking
in the Canon. This is in the Canon. It's much more confusing than the Epson, I think.
The Epson is works great now, better than earlier versions.
Oh, I would agree with that completely. But here, there's a thing on the very top. You guys stand up so you can actually just see this part, because otherwise you open this thing up and it's like, well, where do I put the paper? You have to flip this open, and then this is where the guides are that you can set to actually put your paper in. So you drop a hunk of paper in, you close this, you don't want to pin your paper in there, you don't want to jam it close. As a matter of fact, a lot of printers right now, if you bring it in and it's exactly flush, the first move the printer makes will actually knock them slightly apart. Because again, the registration isn't that big of an issue, and they don't want your paper to jam. What they will tell you definitely though is do not feed paper through this horizontally. So paper goes in only in this direction, it never goes in this direction. If you go in this direction, it'll jam this printer, and I don't know what it'll do in an Epson. I have never tried it. But anyway, this is the last trick that you got to know. If you throw the paper in there and leave it like this, it won't print. You'll get a warning that'll actually come up here saying you got to close the patch. Really? Like, why? What did that really do?
So if you put in a lot of paper, does it flap over maybe?
I don't know. Anyway, that seems silly to me.
I think they actually use the rear language, like, because when it says it, it's like, what do I have to close in the back?
Yeah. My point exactly. Yeah. This is now called the top.
Yeah.
So and just so you know, guys, everybody look here really quickly, just so you can see, this is where you would load heavy media in the back. So anything like a typical matte paper, something that's around the 180 weight would probably go through this top one fine. But if you get into that 360, that really super heavy paper stock, it does not want to bend as much as this is going to bend it. So this is a more direct feed through. And again, it's the same trick. You would just use these sliders to go back and forth. Once you get the paper fed in, whatever, it's just a little bit easier on the paper. So at any rate, but I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that part. Okay. So we're down now. We've actually selected rotate a fit again. These all, it was interesting. Some of these were missing numbers in here. This one's actually missing a number still. So I will go in and fix this number right here. That should be a number 4 at any rate. I could have sworn that was in the file that I fixed, but at any rate. I'll fix that and I'll send you guys for at least the printout that'll exist. But it's relatively simple. I mean, it's pretty simple if you actually follow this. It's just saying then go down to the print job drop down. So if you look at our drop downs right here, we are going to avoid layout altogether. You don't want to deal with any of this stuff, whatever. You want to leave that at standard. You want to be doing all of that work in Photoshop in your file prep. You don't want to be moving your file around on the paper here in this print dialog box. It just, again, you have to figure all the margins. It's just too much effort to actually do that with. Guides and pages and print job, all that stuff we're going to actually leave here. So in print job, we do click on that drop down menu. In the print to drop down here, you have an option to actually go to a printer or to a JPEG file. You want to go ahead and select printer because that's what we're coming down to. And this is one of the places that I have a problem with. Now we're getting into the problem areas that I actually have with Lightroom and Lightroom printing. You'll see down in here as we come down in all of this that you select a print to printer, fine, but then your print resolution, you should set it to 240, 300, or 360, and they give you that option. That to me seems to be a mistake. Now for me, I'm old school. I really believe in a 300. Now we're talking about PPI, pixels per inch, not DPI, PPI. That is the resolution of my file, and that's what I believe people should be printing at. If you are really compelled to, for some reason, I don't know that anybody will ever see the difference, to be honest with you, to set this at 360. It's a larger file. It'll take a little longer to print, but it's not going to kill you. The 240 is for people who want to cheat. What they're really trying to do there is they're trying to get a bigger print without the resolution. They don't have the file, so they're trying to cheat things a little bit and say, now I personally feel like you can spot a print that's done at 240 PPI. There is even in our world of people, this is not a shot against the younger generation. I'm just going to say this. There has been an erosion of what we accept as quality in prints, and there are people who believe, you know what I'm talking about. There are people who believe that you can actually do a resolution of 180, which makes your image bigger. So people want a bigger print. It can't. And anybody who's been around quality printing for any length of time will spot that across the room and just say you were being way too ambitious for that. So for me, I set this at 300, but this is also the file size that I actually work at. So at any rate, I'm going to set mine at 300. That's what I would suggest. It's up to you.
So if you needed to make it bigger, you would then take it into Photoshop?
I would up-res it in Photoshop, okay. And again, you can't be too greedy about that. I have people who go, yeah, I enlarged it 10 times and it kind of fell apart a little bit. What do you think? And I'm like, yeah, but if you put it across the room, like 300 yards away, it'll look great because it's really tiny at that stage of the game. So at any rate, the next thing I have a problem with is this, and I really have a problem with this guy, and it's print sharpening. You can turn it off here, and I would turn it off here. I would not use it here. I would, again, do my sharpening some other way. I would take my file into Photoshop, apply sharpening to it, bring it back. You can use other sharpening algorithms here. So if you go into your develop module, you could do your sharpening there. That is where I would do it. I would not be doing it here. I just think that that's a huge mistake. And the reason I think it's a mistake is that it's never a one size fits all. If you just, low, medium, and high means nothing to me. So you print it out on low and it's not sharp. You print it on high, it's too sharp. Does that mean medium's right? I don't, it's just a guessing game. It's a guessing game regardless, but I feel like I've got more control in the develop module than I do here. Again, I worry about just blanket sharpening an entire print, but anyway, so that would be an issue. Personally, I would turn this off. They are saying down here in what we are actually talking about here to actually your print sharpening is your preference. So you're probably going to have to explain that to someone. Then media type. I also have a problem with this. Glossy or matte. Wow.
But we set it somewhere else. There was like a
When we go to
different,
print, it's going to be changed there, but I just think that this is really clunky.
especially when you're using luster. I'm like, oh, is
Yeah,
that
and
closer
what
to
is
glossy
that?
or closer to matte?
Right. Okay, so exactly. So continuing down with our whole situation down here, I'm going to continue to scroll down to the bottom. And then this part again into our color management. This is in our drop down where we have to select the profile that we're going to do this printing. And again, it's printer and paper specific, so it's the two together. So in this case, I can't even remember if I picked Epson printer at the very top. I haven't picked my, oh, here it is in my color management. This is where I've actually got to pick it. So in this, when you click on this open up dialog box, you have very few options for printer, papers, and profiles. You simply need to click on other and they will all show up. So if we click on other, they're all sitting right here. If you want to go through and actually keep something that always shows up in that dialog box, you simply click on the little check mark next to it. So I'm going to find my Epson P800. If somebody sees this before, okay, so here it is. It's all right in here. So I actually am going to do that same printer, that paper that I was talking about. This premium photo paper glossy. I'm going to go ahead and pick that guy. But if I click on this check marks, that will actually add it to my drop-down menu, and I don't have to go looking for this. So if I'm always printing on this guy, just go ahead and check the ones you're always printing on, and you'll be good to go. Because then now when you click on this drop-down, it'll always show up there. So it's just a way to keep this manageable, and I understand that part. So go ahead, I'm going to pick on that part right here. Again, you've got the same thing here in terms of intent. They only give you two options right here, which for photography is fine, but if you're a graphic artist, you're sending very, very nasty letters to Adobe about how they've got this set up, because those people actually prefer to use things like saturation for their intent. But nonetheless, I'm down here through all of this part, so again, it describes all of that to you. This is the next tricky part right here, and you can see in here that there's a little bit, they've changed this in the dialog box. So this is my number 6 right here is the page setup. If you actually look at my layout right here, you can see page setup is right there, and then printer settings is next to it. You don't want to hit printer settings, you want to hit page setup. So I am going to hit page setup here. This is the only place that you can pick the size of the image that you're actually going to use. Again, you will notice that I've got a mismatch now. I'm trying to set up an Epson printer and it's giving me the Canon driver. So you have to make sure in the drop-down format 4, you go back to your Epson SCP-800. Then in this drop-down menu again, you can check these, the different ones right here. I'm going to leave mine as US letter. But again, this is going to have an impact down the line. If I pick roll paper here, it's going to set roll paper in my future boxes that I can't change. If I need to change it back to a normal sheet fed, I've got to come back to this page setup dialog box. So, but in this case, I'm going to go ahead and just leave it as regular US letter, sheet fed. Again, you've got the very same things at the bottom here if you need to build a custom size. They're sitting right there, so I'm going to leave it as that part right here. Again, you can do orientation right here if you need to flip it, if it's a horizontal or vertical. I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. And then this becomes key to this, and I have gone through this. I've actually marked it right here. This is changed now. It says here, click printer, not printer settings. So if you look at the bottom down here, you will see that there is a button for print settings and a button for printer. You do not want to click this print settings button right here. It will not give you the options that we need, and this thing will go off the rails because this will not match what we're looking at here. The only reason to use print settings here, and I'm just going to tell you guys this, I didn't put it in this PDF because it's a little too confusing. However, if you always use the same piece of paper and you always use the same printer, if you always use the same setup for printing out of Lightroom, you could come into your printer settings
then you can just
and
save
set
the
this
profile.
here and save it right here, and then forevermore when you click on this printer, it will refer to those settings that you did. But in our case, because we've got students going back and forth, I don't want to make something here that is standard for that, because they may be on an Epson one day, Canon the next day, and who knows what the day after. So I'm going to hit cancel out of this. Do not go to this. Come over here to printer, and it will open up the right set of dialog boxes for us. And again, we continue to follow this whole thing. We're halfway through this, guys. So again, make sure at the top that you still, because you can see right here, this is still set up to shoot a Canon, even though I changed the media setting in the page setup for Epson, it doesn't get populated here. So we need to change this to Epson. And then again, we're going to go through basically the exact same thing from this stage on. We are going to go, but you'll see what ends up happening here. So again, in this drop down, you change layout to printer settings. Dialog box opens up, and then you'll see right here, this page setup, I can't change it right here. This page setup was set up in step number 6, which was when we clicked on this page setup dialog box. I can't change it in this dialog box anymore. This is what I meant by we've inherited this. Okay, so again, in the terms of the sheet fed part right here, you can either, again, we're on an Epson printer now, sheet fed, which is the one that's in the front. The normal sheet fed, there is a front, I'll show it to you in just a second. There's a way that you can, again, do the same thing if you're dealing with really heavy media. There's a different feed system that involves less bending of your paper, so it'd just be a different one. But I'm going to leave this as sheet fed. I am going to leave it as my premium photo glossy paper. Again, on this superfine setting here, I'm going to leave this at that 140, and I'm going to leave it at high speed and finest detail. In the old days, you would click save here. Unfortunately, they've removed save here and have now given us a whole nother dialog box to do it in, which is a pain in the ass to me. But nonetheless, so now you would simply hit print from here and your image will print. Make sense? Questions? Pretty straightforward. To actually change this to do the printing for black and white, advanced black and white, you go through the exact same deal. So I'm going to come back up to the top of this to color matching, and again, in color matching, I would choose, I've got to go all the way back now and change this to printer manages the color instead of actually Lightroom managing the color, but the process is exactly the same. And again, it's all spelled out right here.
Isn't there one of the differences between printing out of Photoshop and printing out of Lightroom is who manages the color? Or
absolutely.
Okay.
No. Again, they're both options are available to you.
But isn't there one right way in one and one
It's the exact same in both of them, though. You always, unless you're doing this advanced black and white, where you want to leverage the printing algorithm in the printer, you're always having Photoshop or Lightroom manage your color.
Okay, maybe it was just the old version it had out of Photoshop managed the color, but out of Lightroom, printer managed the color.
Well, again, you can do the
know.
same thing. No, but the same thing exists in Photoshop. I'll cancel out of this, because you can do still in Photoshop.
No, you could do it, but I thought that Columbia basically recommended one way.
No, I would never recommend it again.
Okay.
You want to control your printing
It was
color.
weird, but I was just...
No, because that means you're no longer using the profiles that you've actually
Yeah.
built for the printer and the paper.
Yeah.
It's just guessing. So, are we good on this part? Okay, one last one to go, guys. One last one to go. Undo this guy. We're going to go to the Canon printer now. The majority of it is somewhat the same, so this part is actually will be the same. So I'm going to go into Canon. We've gotten through Photoshop. We're now in Lightroom for Canon. The process starts out exactly the same way. You would again flag the image that you want to print or images that you want to print in the strip that's actually down at the bottom. The settings that we go through right here are exactly the same. So you would want to set single image in this, rotate to fit in this. You are going to go out to the printer. The resolution I would set at 300 ppi. I would turn sharpening off. I would do my sharpening again in the develop module, not in this module right here. Coming down to color management in the profile that you pick. Again, we need to pick a Canon profile right now, and you can see I've already checked the one next to this Canon Pro 1000 for the Premium Plus Glossy No. 2 paper. But again, if this doesn't show up for you, click on Other. It'll open up all your profiles right here. You scroll through them, you find the ones that you want. You pick the one that you want. If you want to actually add it to your drop-down list, add the check mark to it. but I've already got it here in my series. So that's the Canon Pro 1000 for that photo glossy paper. I am going to leave this as perceptual. There's no saturated color in this guy at all, so there would be no reason to, I'm sorry, relative colorimetric is what I use, not perceptual. Scroll down, all of this part is actually set. So I've gone down through all of this, the profile part, the printer manages color part, and this again would be for the advanced black and white. You would actually at this stage go read the advanced black and white. This is where you would actually change this to the printer manages color in this. Continue to go down relative or colorimetric. Those parts are again in my page setup. I'm going back over to the button that's all the way on the left hand side. Click on my page setup, and again you'll see I've got a mismatch now. I've got my color management set up for Canon, but I've still got the format for the printer is still the one that's picked is the Epson one. So I need to change this again to my Canon Pro Series 1000 number 2. The letter size here matters, whether you set this up as borderless, letter, whatever. It has an impact down the line about what is available to us. So this part is actually correct. I'm going to say OK. We're still following the exact same thing that goes down here. Click printer, not printer settings. So I'm not clicking printer settings. I'm clicking printer here. This dialog opens up. Check again to make sure that the correct Canon driver has actually been selected here. It has been. In the printer settings here, again, the printer settings here, you can actually, in this drop-down menu right here, you want to make sure that this is part right there, and this is not showing me this exact size of paper again. Now that existed over here in my printer setup. So this is sitting right here. I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that and go to printer again. And in this drop-down menu, I do not get page size. So this is also going to have to be amended right here because I'm not getting a readout of it either. So at any rate, going through all of this, again, my first step in all of this is to change layout from here down to quality and media. In quality and media, again, I need to pick the paper that I've picked, that I'm printing on, the one that I picked back here in the very beginning, which is not this Photo Premium Platinum. It is the Photo Plus Glossy 2. Again, in the drop-down menu, whether it's top feed or manual feed, this is now top feed, not rear feed, was what it used to be. This is where, again, if you wanted to go to black and white, you would actually check it right here. So again, I'm going all the way down here. I'm going to do top feed. In the print quality of this, again, I would set this to high because I've picked this photo glossy paper. It's not an option for me. So I'm going to go to the next one up, which would be highest. And then again, you've got to click on this drop-down menu to go down to your paper detailed settings. And if you are using matte paper, you would enable this cancel margin regulation. And that's what is being written about right here. And then in this case, I cannot save these either because of the Canon driver. It is strictly a print option, and I am done. Questions? Clear as mud, isn't it?
Will it stay if there are multiple prints?
It should, but I can't
While you're
swear
printing,
to that.
will things sometimes flip back to something?
Yeah, again, I think it just helps to tell students they need to be really vigilant and they should all constantly be checking it.
And what about like color sync?
Well, again, all of this is leveraging color sync, so that's exactly what we're doing here. We're not turning that part off, we're using it here. So color sync is Apple.
Yeah.
So all of this now is being managed by Apple and by Adobe. We are pulling everything else out of we're pulling the printer out of the equation. The printer is actually just a dumb terminal now. And it's strictly printing what we send to it. It doesn't know what it's, the printer's having no control of this at all. We're turning all of its color management off. So the color management happens between Adobe and Apple. Whether you're in Lightroom or Photoshop.
Okay.
Good?
I mean, because when I tried from Lightroom using color sync, it was almost like black and white, and anything that was saturated was super saturated.
We just need to look at your setup. No, we need to look at your setup. We'll take a look at your setup and go through exactly the steps you did and see if we can't spot where the problem is.
Yeah, because I was not happy with following.
But other than that, pizza should be here. Do we know?
They all disappear, so maybe they want to check it out.